Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology, I welcome you all for today's lecture number 12 of Professor H.D. Sankalia monthly lecture series on Jain heritage. Today's topic is locating Jain icons in Jain Hindu, locating Jain icons in Hindu temples. A few case studies from Mewar. And today's speaker is Mihir Keshari. Before beginning our lecture, I would like to request Oshin Bum to give introduction to this lecture and the today's speaker.
Thank you, Dhananjay Bhaiya. So, for those who are new to this particular lecture series, let me first introduce you to the Professor H.D. Sankalia monthly lecture series on Jain heritage. Uh, Let me first also tell you brief about Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology. Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology had been established in the Department of AIHC in Archaeology at Deccan College for the cause of dissemination of Jain heritages, especially amongst the commoners. This particular chair functions it also runs multiple certificate course in Jain art and archaeology. We also have certain internship programs where we train the students of AIHC in archaeology at the Department of Archaeology at Deccan College, and for specific fields like Jain iconography, Jain art, architecture, Jain archaeology. Certain projects like the bibliography project and the other things are also going on. The first and the second National Annual Research Seminar were also held at the department under the aegis of the Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair at the Department of AIHC in Archaeology, Deccan College. This particular lecture series has been named after the establisher and the founder of Department of Archaeology, Professor H.D. Sankalia. This is because Professor H.D. Sankalia, along with Dr. Shobna Gokhale ma'am in the 1960s and 70s, wrote certain articles and brought to light a particular inscription at a cave at Pale in Pune district. Before the establishment of this particular inscription as a Jain inscription, there was no further archaeological evidence as to the presence of Jainism in the region of Western Deccan. It is to the credit of Professor Sankalia and Dr. Klimam that the history of Jainism can be traced back at least as early as to 2nd century BCE. We are very fortunate that we have already completed a year for this particular lecture series with the support of the department and the university. Lecture 12 is being delivered by Mihir Keshari. Mihir Keshari is at present a PhD research scholar in ancient history at the Center for Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His interest broadly lies in anthropology, archaeology, and histories of South Asian religion traditions, with a regional focus on Rajasthan, Delhi, and Nepal. We are very happy that we have Mihir with us, and I look forward to his lecture.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Okay, so I will be sharing my screen. Is it visible?
yes, it is visible.
Okay, so before I start, I would like to thank Bhavan Sitalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology, Deccan College, for providing me with this opportunity to present my ongoing work. Apart from Bhavan Sitalnath Jain for Archaeology, I would like to heartily thank Srikant Gandhi sir. So it all started in July, August this year when I was on my field work in southern Rajasthan, and I came across multiple historical Hindu temples where I located Jain fragments, materials of varied composition and quality affixed in the material structure of Hindu temples. And I was, struck by this question as to how are we to explain such a presence. Can it be simply thought of as reflecting interreligious uh, appropriation, violence, or attempt towards accumulation, or it can be thought of as simply reflecting syncretism or religious plurality of the past, or maybe there is something alternative, an alternative explanation which can help to explain such a presence. So this presentation is an attempt towards understanding or making sense of such a presence. It It is an ongoing research of mine, and I welcome all sorts of suggestions and reflections and reflection about it. So the title of my presentation is Locating Jain Icons in Hindu Temples, a few case studies from Mewar. Uh, as I am a PhD student working in the field of archaeology of religion, it happens to be my disciplinary and methodological dharma to start by winding, if not completely dismissing, historical textual studies or understanding of the ancient past. And in my case, it makes sense because the excessive reliance on sectarian texts in the construction of inter-religious histories of ancient India has led to creation of a perception which marks ancient Indian history as characterized by inter-religious rivalry and struggle. So I won't be discussing much of historiography, but for people who are working in the field of archaeology of religion, particularly of India, some works are essential, and I will be discussing them. Dilip Chakrabarti highlights in ancient Indian context the shortcomings of the literary text in construction of the historical past, emerging out of particular nature of textual tradition in India, and argues for the usefulness of archaeology not just helping to work on prescribed historical questions, but also in its ability to build a non-sectarian and multilineal image of ancient past. So the problem with textual interpretation of ancient Indian history is more than often texts are of particular sectarian nature. So the kind of perception or view that you get from text is very limited, unlike that of archaeology. Archaeology appears to provide an alternative understanding by situating Indic religious tradition within a shared geographical, social, and ritual map. Himanshu Prabhare highlights the importance of archaeological inquiry in the study of religion in Indian historical context and the ways it can lead to differential conclusions. He showcases in her work that the multiple religious identities of sacred spaces was a norm rather than exception in Indian religious history. The most important aspect highlighted by her work pertains to her observation on social basis of religious architecture and the nature of religious change in Indian history. Ray argues that patronage to religion was not limited to the royalty for the purpose of legitimation alone, but rather varied social groups participated in construction and maintenance of religious spaces. So, in Indian historiography, as far as religious construction was concerned, it is immediately assumed to be, patronized by royalty. But that is not the case. We have evidence of far more wider social base of patronage. So the archaeological data as per Ray showcases a differential nature of religious change in the subcontinent, which was marked by continuance of past practices as against the notion of understanding religious expansion in terms of acculturation and sensitization, which give a perception of representing a phenomenon marked by hegemony and integration. Archaeological studies as per her showcases religious dynamics marked by sharing and negotiation. So this is the historiographical background as far as archaeology of religion in India is concerned. So moving ahead. However, within archaeology, a problem arises when one is encountered with materials related to a particular religious tradition in material context of a different religious tradition. Such cases invite extreme opinions, where such a presence is either thought of as indicative of past violence and possible appropriation, or is simply attributed to religious syncretism and Catholicity of the past. While the first opinion can be a possibility, it does not hold for a great many cases. On the other hand, second opinion does not explain much about the historical processes at work. While we are not denying the possibility of presence of religious plurality or syncretism as a phenomenon in ancient past, our attempt here is to understand the historical and the cultural processes which lead to the presence or possibility of such a phenomenon. In this background, this paper aims to locate, situate, and understand the presence of Jain icons in some of the historical Hindu temples of the Mewar region of Rajasthan, arguing for alternative case-specific explanations which are conscious of the evolving histories of the cultural landscape as well as the larger social processes. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is first we will start by discussing some of the case studies from Mewar and also outside Mewar of Hindu temples where I have located Jain icons. And in the second part of my presentation, we'll work on possible explanation and then discussion. Starting with Chittorgarh. Chittorgarh is an ancient site both for Hindus and Jain and also for Buddhists as well. We have some uh, motives to pass from Chittorgarh as well. But the structures which concerns us today are four in number. These are Samideshwara, Samadhishwara or Mukherjee Ka Mandir, Kalika Mata Temple, Ratneshwar Mahadev Temple and Kumbhaswamy Temple. The case of Samedeshwara is somewhat different in the sense that the whole structure is said to be a Jaina structure. On the other hand, the other three are apparently historical Hindu temples. So to start with Samedeshwara temple. So this is the Samedeshwara temple. The Samideshwara, Samadeshwara or Mukhalji ka Mandir is presently a Saiva temple housing a Trimurti of Shiva in the Garbhagriha. There has been a scholarly debate on historical identification of this temple. The temple can be situated to around 10 to 12th century AD, primarily basing on inscription both present within and outside the temple and belonging to various periods. R.B. Somani and R. Nath have identified it as the original Saiva shrine of Samideshwara built by Bodh Karma. However, Ahmed Hathi, through an analysis of sculptural engraving and historicizing different components of the temple, have used for the Jain affiliation of the temple, which is pretty apparent. So, the external facade of the temple is filled with Jain iconography. Uh, he suggests that plethora of Jain themes, Tirthankara, Yakshinis, Yakshas, and ascetics showcases the Jain identification of the shrine. These icons are present on the Mandovar and other parts of the temple, suggest a Jain affiliation as per Amedaki, which is pretty apparent. Moreover, he highlights that the temple at large has been reconstructed at various levels, emphasizing uh, employing the part of earlier and original Samvideshwara temple, as evident from the old pillars inside the Mandapa hall having survived figurines. So this structure is not monolithic in composition, though it has the external facade has Jana structure, original Jana structure. In composition of the internal Mandapa, pillars of Savite sign has been utilized. Daki argues that the inscription belonging to original Samvideshwara was translocated here. Daki also gives a timeline of the structure, the transformation of the structure. As per him, the original Seva sign of Samvideshwara was somewhat near to the current sign, which was earlier a Jaina temple. However, post destruction, Islamic destruction of the site, this site was re-transformed or refashioned as a Seva sign by Rana Mughal. Coming to Kalika Mata temple, it is one of the most earliest extant structure of Chittorgarh. Uh, the current structure is not monolithic again its composition. The internal parts are apparently of older origin. However, the Tikhara and the Mandapa and the external facade are of later construction. Earlier, this shrine was dedicated to Bhagwan Surya, as evident from the niche and apart from the iconographic, composition of the temple. As you enter the shrine, you can find uh, uh, materials of different structures, and among them you can locate Jan and iconography as well. So, as you enter on the roof near the Garbhagriha, you can see a Jan slab with a Tirthankara in the center. Coming to the Ratneswara Mahadeva temple, it is somewhat later temple, can be situated to 15th, 16th century, again in Chittorgarh. Uh, the current temple is dedicated to Lord Shiva. Uh, However, even if it is of late construction, materials have been utilized from other structures of other cultic structures as well. As evident, here you can see an image of Chakreshwari being incorporated in one of the niches of the Antaral. Interestingly, if you see the pillar of the niche, you can see a standing Tirthankara image as well in Savitar Mudra. And in the image on the right of the slide, you can see a door slab with Tirthankara in both Kaivatsar as well as Padmashana in position. Again, coming to Kumbhaswamy temple, it is again one of the earliest signs, can be dated to 9th century AD. From the iconographical composition of the older parts of this temple, it is said to be a Seva or a Sakti sign. However, currently it is a Vaishnava sign. It is said to be refashioned by Rana Kumbha. In construction of this temple, again, materials from different signs has been used of different cultic affiliation, and among which you can locate Jan fragments as well. So on the right side of the slide, you can see a Jan figurine or a Jan part of the Jan lintel with the Thankara seated in Padmasana. So, what is evident from all these case studies from Pittorgarh is the cultural destruction brought by Islamic iconoclasm in relation to temples have been understood only in terms of destruction of the material structure. Post-destruction histories of the structure and the space has not been looked into. Though at times Indic religious structures were converted into mosques, a great many temples escaped this fate, particularly in Rajasthan and Gujarat as well, and were subsequently renovated and rebuilt. This often resulted in transformation of the character, that is, change in sectarian and in cases cultic affiliation, along with structural changes. So, from the studies of Pittorgarh, we see that a Kalika Mata temple, which was a Surya shrine, was transformed into a goddess shrine post-Islamic destruction and reconstruction, and a Kumbhaswamy temple, which was a Saiva shrine, got transformed into Vaishnava shrine again. And similarly, the Samideshwara, current structure of Samideshwara, which was earlier Jaina shrine, got transformed into Saiva shrine again. And even for within Jainism, I can't recall the name, but we have evidence of such a transformation within the intra-cultic transformation, where a Digambara sign got transformed into a Svetambara sign and Svetambara into Digambara. So this post-destruction reconstruction of temple has not been theorized upon. We need more such studies to see if there is a historical pattern to it, and if we can understand it by situating within the socio-economic and political context of the period. However, it would be wrong to say that such evidences are only restricted to Mewar only. We have cases from Hadoti here, where such case is of Kesorai from Kesorai Patan of Jambu Margeshwar Mahadeva Temple. Kesorai Patan is again a very ancient site, not far from Kota, around 12 or 17 kilometers from Kota, situated on the banks of River Chambal. This site is sacred both for Hindus and Jains alike. The current structure which concerns us here is Jambu Margeshwara Temple. As per D.R. Bhandarkar, these three temples were independent in their composition, but were later artificially, you know, uh, uh, erected as a similar sign with a common mandapa. The composition of this structure has been, the materials have been utilized from different structures, and among which you can locate Jain fragments as well. So as you enter the sign, one of the pilasters we can see on the right side of the site is a Jain fragment where the Shwetambar ascetic is standing, and there is a small inscription of 12th century, 11th century or 12th century AD, with something written which cannot be read as of now. It would be wrong to say that we have cases of Jain Hindu appropriation of Jain signs. We also have cases of Jain appropriation, or better to use the term use of Hindu signs or materials. We have two such cases. One from Mewar again, with Mahavir Temple Ahar, as per has been studied by M.A. Dasi. The temple stands on a high Jagati terrace, now thoroughly renovated, except at the main southern end. The two Devakulikas, thanking the storied Galanika, uh, though old, do not belong to the complex of the Jain temple. They were transferred possibly in 15th century during the time of Maharaja Rajmalla from the original location near the Brahmanical pond as you said here. So the Mahavir temple complex of Ahar, though many structures are Jain in origin, it has been constructed, using Hindu Brahmanical temple materials as well, as evident from this image. One of the two Devakulikas is of can be said to be made from Jain, a Hindu icon or fragment. Another example is from Adinath and Parshvanath temple of Khajuram, as studied by Julia IB Hesewal. I haven't been to this shrine, so I won't say much about it. But as per Hesewal, the earlier denomination of this shrine were non-Jain, that is Brahmanical in nature, which was later appropriated and altered by Jain post-Islamic conquest and destruction of the site. In subsequent centuries, even changes within the original Jain alteration also happened. This is evident by presence of Hindu iconography on the external edifices of the temple and absence of Jain imagery. Changes were done both on sculptural part as well as the structural configuration of the sign, such as filling of forced windows, addition of newer signs, changes in door frame, initiates of production of asa, etc., as well as by placing a copy of an inscription. So this is the Mahavir temple. However, again, it would be wrong to say that presence of Jain icons in Hindu temple or Hindu icons in Jain temple. can be seen only in structures which went a process of reconstruction post Islamic destruction. We have evidence of temples of Hindu temples uh, where presence of Jain icons appear to be in situ or having nothing to do with Islamic destruction of the site. One such important case is of Sasbahu Temple of Nagda. It can be dated to 10th to 11th century. It is a very big Vaishnava temple complex. Uh, so this is the ground plan of the Sasgaon temple complex. Basically, it is composed of two large temples. One is the Sas or mother-in-law temple, which is relatively bigger and far more intricately carved, with around 10 subsidiary shrines. Both Krishna Deva and Amitabhi has counted 10, but I counted 11. Uh, uh, so these subsidiary shrine of the Sas temple, as per Krishna Deva and Amidafi, they think that they were dedicated to Das avatars of Vishnu, but they are highly dilapidated and we cannot make much sense of it. So we cannot be sure if they were dedicated to Das avatara. For our purpose, what is important is the second temple, which is the Bahu temple, which is somewhat later, not very late, but somewhat later, and a little less elaborate and intricately carved. Again, a Vaishnava dedicated to Bhagavan Vishnu. Uh, it has four Devikulikas of subsidiary signs. And what is fascinating about this Bahu temple is that though it has been studied extensively, the Vaishnava temple complex of Nanda has been studied extensively from Pabhushan to D.R. Vandalkar to Amedaki Krishna Deva to relatively recent studies. But what has not been identified or located is presence of Jain iconography on the Bahu temple particularly. So I am the first to locate it, not to discover it. I don't actually like to use the term discover because they were present nevertheless. So this is the external facade of this Bahu temple, and on the Pakshasana particularly, you can see presence of Jain, icons, the Tirthankara seated in Padmashana. Uh, Interestingly, presence of Jain iconography on this Vaishnava temple complex is not limited to external facade of the temple only, but one of the Dev Kulikas, on the Lalad beam of one of the Dev Kulikas or subsidiary shrine, you can see currently a Jain figurine of a Tirthankara seated in Padmasana. Uh, and again, in the three niches of this subsidiary sign are dedicated to goddesses. The first two identified as Goddess Saraswati and Lakshmi by both Krishna Deva and Amirati. On the other hand, the third has been identified by Krishna Deva simply as Devi and has not been identified by Amidati. Though interestingly enough, in the his study of Samvideshwara, Krishna Amidati has identified a very similar uh, sculpture of a Devi as that of a Jain Yakshini. She is in a sitting posture, four hands, one holding a noose, a goat, uh, one a rosary, and other a kamandali. So there is a possibility of this deity being identified as Jain Yakshini, and possibility increases because we have a Tirthankara image. It has to be identified as Tirthankara on the Lalad builder. The other subsidiary sign of the Bahu temple, unfortunately, the Sikhara and the Mandapa and the Antaral are completely dilapidated. We cannot make sense of it. But fortunately enough, we have the niches which are intact. So the first two icons has been identified as Kubera and Ganesha, both by Krishnadeva and Amidapi. On the other hand, the third is identified by Krishnadeva as Shiva and by Amidapi as Bhairava. Because of the not so typical hair though, I thought of it being Dharanendra if you are to identify it with a serpent hood. But in Kota Museum, I came across a very similar image of a Bhairava. So there is possibility of it being a Bhairava. The other two subsidiary signs of the Bahu temple, one is dedicated to Devi. So on the Lalad window, you can see Devi, and on the three niches of this temple, you can see Chamunda, Mahishasur Mardini, and Mahakali. Coming to the fourth and the last subsidiary sign of Bahu temple, on the Lalad window, you can see Surya image, and in the three niches, we have Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. Again, it would be wrong to say that evidence of Jain icons in Hindu temples in situ is only present at Nagda. But we have cases from other places as well. Now from Marwar, it's Surya Temple 1 of Ocean. It is one of the earliest temples of Ocean and can be dated to early 8th century CE. It is a relatively simple structure consisting of a sanctum and a porch separated by a small capelle. The exterior temple walls contain niches for deities. The east-facing niche contains images of Surya in the center, flanked by images of Kuber and Jain Tirthankar Parsona. As per Cynthia Atherton, she points to a later reconfiguration of the niche images, explaining the odd inclusion of Jain image in the temple wall. She suggests the sign being originally a Seva sign. However, even if of later date, the very possibility of inclusion of a Jain image in the temple wall needs explanation. So this is the plan of the Surya Temple 1, projected by Cynthia Atherton. On the left image, you can see the plan, and on the right image, the external niche, the Surya sculpture planned by Kuber and Parsonath, which is said to be of a later birth. But the presence of a Jain icon in Hindu temple has to be explained, and it is remarkable in its own way. Again, we have other evidence from Mewar again, which is of a later period of 17th century of Jagdish temple Udaipur. So, built by Maharaja Jagat Singh I of Mewar, it is a Maru Gurjara Vaishnava shrine of Panchayat and type with four subsidiary shrines dedicated to Devi, Shiva, Surya, and Ganapati respectively. A small Devi housing a bronze statue of Garuda guards the entrance of the main structure, established on a high platform being made up of Garbhagriha, Antarala, Dhruva Mandapa, Sabha Mandapa, etc. The outer layers of the temple structure is elaborately carved, consisting of Gajathar, Aswathar, Narathar, etc. Another is of particular importance, which is primarily carved with depictions of deities, erotic couples, singers, dancers, ascetic of various persons from Vaishnava, I assume Vallavacharya, identified him as Vallavacharya tradition, to Seva saints doing yogic asanas of various sorts. Some images can be identified as images of Tirthankara, seated in traditional Padmasana or Dhyanasana, with Shiva's mat on the center of the chest. So this is the Naratha. You can see presence of Hindu icons as well from Vishnu, Umameshwara, to various ascetics, and among them you can also identify presence of Jain icons as evident from the second image, whereas the Sankara image is seated in Dhanasana or Padmasana Mudra with Srivat Smart very prominently displayed. Again, another evidence comes from Hadoti, region of Rajasthan, Kesorai temple Pundi, constructed in 1641 AD, a Vaishnava shrine again. Situated on the banks of river Chambal, the ancient site of Kesorai Patan, the current temple was built in 1641 AD by Maharaja of Bundi Rao Prasad. Initially belonged to Ramanuj Sampradaya, which was later transformed to Pushti Margi tradition. The main idol is the Yog Narayan form of Vishnu in white marble. The temple stands on a high platform with an equally imposing shikhara, which is elaborately carved. The outer portions of the temple is elaborately carved, consisting of Gajathar, Aswathar, Narthar. Narthar is again of particular importance for us, which is primarily carved with depictions of deities, erotic couples, singers, dancers, ascetics of various persons, from Vaishnava to Stravasant, doing yogic asanas of all. Some images can also be identified as images of Tirthankara, both in seated Padmasana, Dhyanasana, and standing Kayasthal posture, with the Srivat Smart on the center of the. So, the very elaborate Narthar, Gajathar, and Aswathar, and within the Narthar, you can identify Hindu images of deities as well as ascetics. And among them, you can also identify Tirthankara images, both in standing, Kayasthal Mudra, as well as sitting or Dhyanasana, Padmasana, with Srivat Smart very prominently displayed on the chest. So, of all these cases, how are we to explain? So, to understand them, it is important to understand past or earlier work. Interreligious relations in archaeological context has been primarily explored and theorized in relation to Buddhism and Brahmanical Hinduism. Studies in Jain materiality or interreligious dialogue has been less. Uh, Presence of Hindu sculptures at Buddhist sites has been explored by Birennath Prasad. So Birennath Prasad, in his study of Nalanda Mahavihar, it is interesting that in Nalanda Mahavihar you find Hindu images as well, particularly of Seva origin of Uma Maheshwara. So Birennath Prasad basically tried to understand the reason behind presence of Hindu icons in a Buddhist site or Buddhist complex. So he argues that the Buddhist monasteries was basically basically trying to integrate Hinduism within a uh, subversive framework, call it as subversive integration. Other similar studies have been done by scholars like Abhishek Amar. He studied Dasavatara images of Bihar region and argues that there was an attempt on part of Vaishnavas to identify and integrate Buddha within the Vaishnava code. Other studies has also been done by Umakant Mishra in context of Odisha, where he basically mapped presence of Buddhist and Hindu as well as Jain icons on map of Odisha and tried to understand the poly-religious composition and interaction of the place. In Jain context, studies have been limited or not completely absent. One such important study is by Virendranath Prasad. In his work on Purulia district of West Bengal, he basically located or mapped presence of hero stones in and around Jain temples and argues that there was an attempt on part of Jainism for cultic integration and ritual innovation, where hero stones, which is assumed to be representative of tribal tradition, is integrated in Jain sacred space as an attempt toward cultic integration. Another important study by Julia A.B. Hesewald of Karnataka, he basically mapped the material interaction between Hinduism and Jainism, particularly Shaivism, in case of Karnataka, through methodological framework of extreme dependencies, religious violence, appropriation, and reuse. In our context, some other cases are of importance. One is that of Satya Mata, which has been extensively studied both by anthropologists, historians, art historians alike, from Lawrence Bob to R.C. Agrawal. The case of Satya Mata is interesting in the sense that a similar image or a deity can be, identified or maybe related by different communities, be it Hindu or Jain. Another important study is of Kesaria Ji by Caroline Humphrey. This is of particular importance because Caroline Humphrey, in her analysis of Jain festive melas of Rajasthan, such as that of Kesaria Ji, highlighted that through sharing of ritual and religious space with the Jains and other sub communities, Jains appear to legitimize their role as a merchant community in the non-Jain lands. However, she observed that such an interaction never leads to conversion of the Jains to Jain. So Kesarya is important in the sense that the image of Tirthankara, which is black in its color, is identified as Parsonath by Jain, and by the Gils and Minas and Gujars or Hindus of the region, he is identified as Kariyaji or Kariya Baba. So the very same icon can be related or identified by different traditions in a different way, something very interesting. And what is more interesting is that such a relation not necessarily lead to cultic integration, but rather it appears to be an attempt towards social integration. Now, coming to the reflection, what are the major findings of our study? So, one of the most important finding of our study is that there is no one explanation to all the presence, all the sort of presence of Jain icons in Hindu temple. Each study appears to provide a different understanding and has to be understood in its own terms by basing it in its history and particular cultural landscape. So, to discuss some of the findings, what is important is the need for further studies. Islamic iconoclasm and religious reconstruction has to be studied further. We need more such case studies to see if there is a pattern to it, if there is some historical understanding through which we can understand it. Second is that Jain images in outer facade of Hindu temples, such as the Kakshasana and the Narathar, along with depiction of auspicious beings, suggests that Jain Tirthankars were simply seen as auspicious beings, not suggestive of any attempt toward assimilation. This is particularly true for Jagdish temple and also of Keswarai temple of Keswarai Patan, because as you see in the Narathar or external facade of the temple, which are apparently far more, the Hindu icons are present in far more number, and Jain icons are relatively few in the present actually, nonetheless. So, what appears that Jain Tirthankaras are simply seen as auspicious beings, and their presence in Hindu structure are not suggestive of any attempt toward assimilation. The case of Nagda is unique, though it can be interpreted as an attempt towards subversion and integration, but we lack sufficient data to establish it. The Nagda case is unique in the sense that uh, Jain icons are not only present on the external facade of the temple as indicative of they being identified as auspicious beings, but if we are correct in our identification, a whole Jain Kulika is can be thought to be representative or key of Jain in character. So the interaction between Jainism and Vaishnavism is interesting from a literary aspect as well. To suggest a few dimensions, Lord Rishabhnath is identified as one of the avatars of Bhagavan Vishnu in Bhagavad Puran as per Patnath Jaini, and again Lord Deminath and Krishna are identified as Buddhists. So, what is the possibility of the Devkulika of Nagda or of the Vaishnava complex of Rajasthan temple being identified with either with Bhagwan Rishabhnath or Namithat is uh, possibility is interesting to conjecture. The unfortunate thing with the Vaishnava complex of Nagda is the Garbhagrihas do not have any idols left intact. So we cannot be sure about the cultic affiliation or dedication of the Devakulika. Alternatively, the social dimensions of temples can be explored to understand multi-religious presence. This is the case presented by Caroline Humphrey in her analysis of history melas of Rajasthan, and I would like to explain it through discussion of a very brief case study from Delhi, which is of Satya Mata Temple in New Delhi. Again, these are fairly new temples, so the image on the left is from the temple Chitambara Jain Temple. The Sikhara which you see is of Satya Mata Temple. Both are very new temples, uh, very next to each other. So as you enter the Satya Mata Temple, there is a very big hoarding as to people who actually donated to the Satya Mata Temple for its construction. It is still under construction. So among Hindu donors, you also can identify Jain donors as well, which is not very peculiar or startling given for many Jains, particularly the Utpal, the Satya Mata is their Kul Devi. What is interesting and important about this case is as you enter the Garbhagriha, particularly the Pradakshina path, you can find a lot of religious paintings, which are evidently Hindu in origin, but also some of them are Jain, particularly images of Parshvanath as well. So, what is important here is the way social patronage can alter material or iconographical composition and and can transform it. So, rather than the presence of Jain icons in Hindu temples or Hindu icons in Jain temples purely through the lens of cultic integration, appropriation, violence. There is a possibility of seeing them through the social prism that their inclusion in a way was because of an attempt towards social integration. So this is from my side. It is still a research in progress. So I welcome any comment or question. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mihir, for this lecture. Uh, if anyone have any question, you can write it down in the message. Okay, we got first, I think, question by Swati Pungliaji. In today's climate, where religious boundaries are often emphasized, studying such examples from Mewar reminds us of a long history of coexistence, artistic collaboration, and mutual respect between Jain and Hindu traditions. The presence of Jain icons in Hindu temple highlight India's deeply interwoven religious landscape, where sacred spaces were historically shared and reinterpreted rather than divided. Thank you. Okay, this is the appreciation message from Swati Pungliaji. Thank you so much. We don't have any other question or any other message. So I would like to invite Prashant Goel to give vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dhananjay Bhaiya. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology, Department of AISC and Archaeology, Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute, Pune, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for being part of today's event. We are especially grateful to Keshari ji for delivering the lecture 12 of the Professor H.D. Sankalia monthly lecture series on Jain heritage. His talk on Jain icons in Hindu temples, a few case study of Mewar, was highly informative. It was a pleasure to listen to such well-researched and thoughtful perspective. I would like to thank Professor Shahidan Ansari Madam, Dr. Srinit Pandey Sir, Dr. S.C. Jain Sir, Dr. Renuka Porwal Madam, Dr. Anjay Dhanwade Sir, Dr. Shailesh Sinde Sir, Vineet Gaware Ji, Anchit Jain Ji, Saurabh Jain Ji for joining us. I would also like to thank the organizing team and my fellow member at the Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology for their effort in making this event possible. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. Your interest and presence made this session very meaningful. Thank you all once again.
Thank you so much.